everybody, this is Miss Nicole with Bloomfield Public Library for my latest edition of Science Bytes, and I'm really excited about today's project. We're in the month of October, and this is the month where NASA has International Observe the Moon Night. And with that in mind, I decided we would do a project that would show how impact craters are created on the surface of the moon. When you look up at the moon in the night sky with your naked eye, or even with just a pair of regular binoculars, you'll see some patterns on the surface of the moon. You'll see some circular, darker shapes, and those are the craters, and you'll see some rays that come out from the edges of those craters. And those are actually what they call ejecta patterns. And those were created when something impacted the surface of the moon and made that crater. So what makes an impact crater? Well, basically, out in the solar system, in outer space, there are pieces of asteroids and comets and of varying sizes that will impact the surface of planets and moons and other celestial bodies. And those are what are called impact craters, when those large pieces of matter strike a surface of a planet or a moon or another object. Scientists have done amazing work studying all of the information that they bring back from their space missions. And one of the things they've learned from studying lunar rock samples is that about 4 billion years ago, the solar system and outer space were filled with a lot of asteroids and comets and pieces of asteroids and comets. And they would regularly hit the surfaces of planets, hit the surfaces of moons, and create all sorts of impact craters. Now, over time, over 4 billion years, a lot of the evidence of those impact craters have sort of disappeared or been disguised on the surface of Earth because we have a lot of weather patterns. We've had mountains that have gotten created and other things that have happened to disguise those impact craters. But the surface of the moon doesn't experience a lot of weather patterns, and because of that, it's almost like a living record of things that happened 4 billion years ago. So you can still see all the evidence of those impact craters and the things that have happened to the surface of the moon. So today, we are going to do a project where we actually demonstrate how these impact craters are formed on the moon and what happens. We need just a few simple ingredients from our kitchens at home to do this project, which is why I didn't do any kits to distribute. You'll need some regular all-purpose flour. If you have something like cake flour at home, that works too. You'll need a darker powder, so you could also use something like cocoa powder. But cocoa powder can be a little expensive, so if it's not something that you already have at home, one of the things that I think will work just as well is like a chocolate cake mix. And you can usually get a boxed cake mix at the store on sale for $1.50 or $1.75. You will need a pan to put everything in. You can use a regular circular cake pan. You can use a larger pan, but you want it to have a little bit of depth because you're going to want to layer these powders in the pan and create maybe about a depth of this much in the pan. So for me, I actually went to the food store and bought just a disposable foil cake pan. I wanted it to be a little wider because I wanted to have a lot of surface to do some demonstrations on. But I have put about an inch of all-purpose flour inside my pan. And now what I'm going to do and show you is we're going to do a delicate layer of sprinkles on top. It doesn't have to coat it entirely. You just want some over the surface. And then we're going to put a thin layer of the cocoa powder or the chocolate cake mix on top of that. And let me show you how we're going to do that. So here is my pan with the 1 inch of flour inside. And I actually have some sprinkles that I got as part of a little kit. You can use any kind of sprinkles you've got. Just make sure that they're not too thick. You don't want something like chocolate chips. Oops, sorry, you can hear the turkey in the background. You don't want something like chocolate chips. You want just some nice light sprinkles, and they don't have to entirely cover the surface. You just want to make sure that you have a good representation of sprinkles across the surface of the flour. Just like that. And these sprinklers are going to represent the geological material under the surface of the moon or a planet that an asteroid might hit. I'm also going to add a few of these just because they reminded me of geological things. They're my shiny gold sprinkles. And that's plenty. That's plenty of sprinkles. Now we're going to add our darker surface material, and we're just going to add enough to cover the surface. We're not going to do another inch of it like we did with the flower, or maybe that's more like an inch. We just want it to cover our surface. So here I have some cocoa powder, and that's one of the things you can use. And I actually have a sifter here. They have some smaller ones. This is the size that I have at home. You don't need to use this, but it does help spread it nice and smoothly. You can use just a spoon if that's all you have at home. But here, whoop, I'm just going to do it like this, like so. But I'm also going to show you how to do it with just the cake mix, because I think that would work just as well too, and it's going to be cheaper than doing it with cocoa powder. So if we pour in some chocolate coke mix, some of the chocolate cake mix, we can just do it like this. And there we go. And that's good. We've pretty much covered up the surface of our cake pan. Now it's time for the fun part. So now we're going to demonstrate what happens when the impact crater actually takes place. So you're going to need to find a variety of objects that can act like asteroids or comets or pieces of asteroids and comets. So for example, I went out to the yard and I found, this is a larger stone, but I also found some smaller ones. I also had a bouncy ball. I even had some marbles. So you can get a variety of objects, and we are going to hold them at a height and drop them into our cake pan. And I'll explain what we're seeing when we do our first demonstration. So I think for the first one, I'm going to use the big rock. This is probably a planet killer sized asteroid, but this is what we're going to use in our cake pan for the first one. I wanted to show you about how high I'm going to hold it, and then I'll show you a close-up before I drop it. So I'm going to hold this rock about this high above the cake pan. Now if you're doing this in your kitchen, you might want to have a placemat or a tablecloth or a towel underneath, because you may get powder going over the side of your pan because we're holding something up so high. But this is the height I'm going to use, and now let's see what actually happens when I drop it. Right, I'm about to drop it, and here comes our planet killer size asteroid. Now as you can see, we have a lot of things that happened here. When it impacted the surface of our moon, we had all of these rays that came out from the surface of the planet. Those are what they call ejecta. And that's when the rock hit, those came up and out of the planet. And you can see our sprinkles, those represent other geological material that was underground in the planet and got ejected as well. So you can see how all that stuff came out from the center of the planet. And if we move the rock, we see the actual crater. So this is our crater. Here are our ejecta rays. And all those sprinkles represent different geological material that actually got thrown out from underneath the surface of the planet when that asteroid or other object hit the surface of the moon. Now one of the things you can do is drop objects of different sizes, like this is a smaller stone I think I'm going to try this time, and you can do things at different angles because that will also change how you see ejecta patterns and how these craters are created. So this time I think I'm going to throw it at a slight angle and we'll see what happens. And I'm going to try and do this one in slow motion so we can really see what happens with those ejecta rays. You can see when I did this throw at an angle that most of the ejecta patterns actually went in the direction that the rock hit the surface of what is our moon. And they also kicked up that same amount of material, but more of the rays went forward in the direction that the impact was happening. So that is the basics of our project for today. You saw how some of these impact craters are happening on the surface of the moon and how they used to happen on the surface of our planet, planet Earth, and other planets. And be sure to test it out with lots of different objects of different sizes. Throw them at different heights, do some lower or higher, do some at angles, and you'll see some, and make sure you note the differences in how those ejecta patterns or those rays are happening, or how much material, how many of those sprinkles are kicking up from under the surface, that outer surface of our planet or our moon. And now the next time you look up at the night sky and you see that moon, when you look at those craters, you'll have a better idea of how they actually formed. And you might even notice not just the dark spots where the bigger craters are, but also the rays that go out from each of those craters. And now you know how they happened. That's all for our Science Bites for today. So hopefully you enjoyed this one, and I have some fun things planned for our next few. So I hope you'll join me for those as well. Always pay attention to see if I'm giving out kits with materials. We didn't need it for this project, but we might with some future projects. And until our next time, enjoy the lovely fall weather, and I will see you soon. Goodbye, everybody.